Hey, I'm Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. Today we're going to be doing something kind of fun. We're going to be doing the ultimate director showdown. We're going to be doing a single elimination tournament to decide who is the best filmmaker of all time. Here's a quick peek at the bracket. As you can see, there are a lot of names in here. These are all filmmakers who are good, are worth considering for the title. Some outside the box picks, some more mainstream picks. There are so many that you can't even see them all. I can't even read them. So we're going to be zooming in and we're going to go through them one at a time. Every director is going head to head. These are in a completely randomized order. There's no like seeding going on. It's just they're randomized. And I can see we have a tough one up first, David Lynch versus Charlie Kaufman. But before we get into that, let's cover some housekeeping, some ground rules. First, let's consider this the 2022 edition of the Best Director Tournament, and I might revisit this in a year's time or at some other point in the future to do another installment, and whoever wins this tournament can go up against the winner from the next tournament, because there are a lot of other filmmakers out there. Second, this bracket maker that I'm using, this website, has a limit on the number of people you can include. I even paid for their pro version. They still limit the number you can use. I believe it is 64. So there are 64 filmmakers in this tournament. Obviously, there are many more. There are a bunch of other filmmakers that I would even have included and do have a shot at, earning the title. So we will definitely be doing a part 2 at some point in the future, not in the immediate future, but at some point. And since part 2 is up in the future, let me know in the comments who you would want to see included, maybe who you would want to see included, or who you would have expected to include. Because maybe I just forgot somebody, this is just going off of all the directors that came to mind. So there are probably some filmmakers that I didn't think of. There also might be some filmmakers that I just don't like as much, so maybe I left them up for a reason. There are also a number of filmmakers who I would guess definitely have quality enough filmographies to be worth including somewhere in this tournament, but I just haven't seen enough of their work yet. So I'm going to quickly rattle through a few filmmakers who I think might be on the list if I have seen more of their work, and I will try to see more of their work for the second installment. So I'm just going to rattle off some names here. Yasuhiro Ozu, John Ford, Jacques Audiard, Jean-Luc Godard, Hayao Miyazaki, Federico Fellini, Louis Buñuel, Michelangelo Antonioni, Jane Campion, Agnes Varda, Francois Truffaut, Oliver Stone, Leos Carax, Lars von Trier, Satija Ray, Terrence Malick, Bellatar, Sui Hark, Chang Dong Lee, Ang Lee, Edward Yang, Zhang Yimou, Gus Van Sant, Todd Haynes, Peter Bogdanovich, Wong Kar-wai, and Robert Bresson. These are all filmmakers who either have really prestigious reputations, but I haven't dove into their work yet, or filmmakers who I've seen 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 movies from that I thought were excellent, and I just want to be able to see a more well-rounded look at their total filmographies. Like Edward Yang, I've seen 2 of his movies. Leos Carax, I've seen 2, and I've loved both. But I just want to get more of a comprehensive look at their filmographies before I evaluate them in this context, because I think that's what would be fair to them. I think it's a little unfair to put them through this tournament without knowing the full breadth and width of their directorial output. And as I mentioned, there are a bunch of other filmmakers that I'm kind of saving for round 2 because I filled up all the bracket slots in this 64, and I won't reveal what those are so that it can be a surprise for when we do round 2. But now, without further ado, let's look at our first matchup here. We have David Lynch versus Charlie Kaufman. That's a pretty tough one off the bat. Charlie Kaufman is a little bit more known as a screenwriter. Even still, I think he started off his career as purely a screenwriter. He didn't turn to directing until relatively recently. I think that is going to hold him back in this tournament a bit. But if I'm being honest, David Lynch would come out on top anyway. Charlie Kaufman's directorial output is much smaller. That's worth factoring in. Charlie Kaufman is excellent, though. David Lynch is a strong contender to take the whole thing for me. Now, I want to be completely transparent. I have not thought about these rankings at all. I don't know who would win or whatever. This is going to be based on my opinion, but I've never just sat down and organized my list of directors. People have regularly asked in the comments for me to do a top 10 directors list or whatever. This is kind of taking the place of that. I thought this would be a more interesting way to do that, a more exciting and fresh way. And I don't know who's going to win. David Lynch is definitely a strong contender, but obviously there are a lot of strong contenders in here. All 64 are strong contenders. Next up, oh, look at that. We have two South Korean auteurs in the second matchup. It's quite a coincidence. I think these are the only two South Korean directors on here. I considered Kim Ji-woon as well. I might include Kim Ji-woon in the second edition, but he's not in this one. So I think these are there's Chang Dong-lee is another South Korean director who I've seen two of his movies and loved both of them, which are Burning and Peppermint Candy. I made a video about Peppermint Candy. And Kim Ki-duk is another South Korean filmmaker that I do plan on including in the second installment. But I think these are the only two South Korean directors in this first installment, so it's quite coincidental that they were matched up in this randomized order. This is really tough. These two are both excellent. I think if they weren't up against each other, they could both make pretty deep runs in this tournament. Park Chan-wook just had Decision to Leave, which is a big deal. Though I think his best movies are things like Old Boy, like The Handmaiden. Bong Joon-ho's best are things like Parasite and Memories of Murder. I mean, honestly, neither of these filmmakers has missed, really. Some people consider Stoker a miss from Park Chan-wook. I still liked Stoker. I don't love it, but I still liked it. I even liked his the BBC miniseries he directed, Little Drummer Girl. Even that was good. Bong Joon-ho, Okja doesn't fire on all cylinders for me, but it's still quite good. This is really tough. I'm going to be agonizing over many of these choices, I think. And I think especially in this first round, once we go into the subsequent rounds, it's going to move a little quicker, but this is going to be a big-ass video. And, feel free in the comments to follow along and let me know who you would pick out of... You don't have to do every matchup because there's a lot, but, out of the matchups that tickle your fancy or the ones that you disagree with. And, obviously we can have different opinions because it would be kind of weird if we agreed on everything, don't you think? Given how subjective this is. Man, Park Chan-wook versus Bong Joon-ho. I think Bong Joon-ho is the more popular one out of the two. They're both pretty popular, but I think Bong Joon-ho has more of a groundswell of support because Parasite is definitely, I think, the best known South Korean movie to mainstream audiences because of the Best Picture win and everything. But even before that, just box office wise, it had really far reach. I think, this is really tough for a matchup this early. Oh man, I love both of these guys. I'm feeling a slight edge toward Park Chan-wook directorially. I think I'm going to give it to Park Chan-wook, just barely. It's a very tight matchup, but I think I got to go Park Chan-wook. Okay, next up, Mike Leigh versus Roman Polanski. They both made a lot of great films. Mike Leigh is far less talked about than Roman Polanski is, but Mike Leigh means a lot to me personally because his sort of directorial ethic, his directorial approach resonates deeply with me as a filmmaker. And Roman Polanski has made some of the best movies ever made, like Chinatown and Rosemary's Baby and whatnot. I think his crimes are going to factor into this tournament a little bit as the deciding factor. So I will say, sexual predator gets the loss. Okay, Guillermo del Toro versus James Cameron. Two legendary filmmakers. I would guess that I am a bit less of a fan of both of these guys than a lot of people are. I have done a James Cameron tier list. I like a lot of his movies, but I don't like all of his movies. I don't really like Titanic, for example, and I don't give a shit about Avatar. I have no interest in seeing the new one either. I'm going to go Guillermo del Toro on this one. Okay, Wes Anderson versus Lynne Ramsay. This is an interesting one. Vastly different filmmakers. Lynne Ramsay has a much smaller output. Wes Anderson is the much more popular and more well-known one. But Lynne Ramsay is the filmmaker behind. She made We Need to Talk About Kevin, Ratcatcher, You Were Never Really Here. What's her other one? I watched it. Oh, Mover and Collar is what it is. Mover and Collar didn't work for me as much as I wanted to, but We Need to Talk About Kevin is phenomenal, and You Were Never Really Here, I think, is really great as well, and got kind of misunderstood when it came out. I think the weakness of Mover and Collar and the smaller body of work overall is going to give Wes Anderson the win. Mover and Collar is not bad. I want to be clear on that. I just think it is weaker than any of Wes Anderson's movies, I would say. Because I've enjoyed all of Wes Anderson's movies, and he has such a strong directorial voice. So does Lynne Ramsay, though. Lynne Ramsay assembles movies in a more poetic way, in a less literal way, at least in some of her movies. Steven Spielberg versus Sidney Lumet. I feel like this would be an easy decision for most people, and most people would pick Steven Spielberg. For me, it's an easy decision to go with Sidney Lumet. Sidney Lumet I consider one of the most, I hesitate to say underrated because Sidney Lumet has made many movies that are really highly rated, but Sidney Lumet as a director I feel like doesn't get talked about as much, and Sidney Lumet is absolutely one of my favorite filmmakers. I'll take Sidney Lumet over Spielberg any day. Okay, Paul Thomas Anderson versus Robert Altman. This matchup, something about this matchup feels appropriate. Like, it feels right to put them head to head for some reason. And the way that they like tackle diverse subject matter and the way that they kind of carve their own path and they don't abide by the trends of the current industry. Obviously, Robert Altman is like a generation before Paul Thomas Anderson. They both made a lot of great movies, of course. I mean, that's why they're on this list. I probably don't need to keep saying that. I'm trying to cancel out the like recency bias thing because I did just watch recently Robert Altman's MASH and I quite disliked it. So that's fresh in my mind as a movie that I really didn't like. You can follow me on Letterboxd, by the way, at this, and you can read my MASH mini review to see why I disliked it so much. That one really left a bad taste in my mouth. I don't want that to color Robert Altman's loss necessarily, because I have greatly enjoyed every other Robert Altman movie that I've seen. Even still, I would give Paul Thomas Anderson the win. He's a strong contender to make a deep run in this tournament, I think. Okay, Werner Herzog versus Noah Baumbach. I love both of these guys. Noah Baumbach, I think, is one of those filmmakers that I personally like and think is better than a lot of people seem to. I've made multiple videos on Baumbach, like I did a video essay on Marriage Story, and I did one on Francis Ha. You can check out both of those from and I did a tier list on him, of course. Werner Herzog, I think, is the more important filmmaker for like cinema as a whole. I think he's a really instrumental voice and a really important figure in filmmaking. Werner Herzog gets the win there. Okay, Darren Aronofsky versus John Cassavetes. This is another one where I feel like, kind of like Michael Leigh, I have more of a personal connection to John Cassavetes. And that's actually interesting to say because I found John Cassavetes much later on. Darren Aronofsky was, when I first got into film, his early movies, Pi in particular actually, was really influential to me when I first started directing. Like Pi was a direct influence on a couple of the early short films I made, like with the really stark black and white and the surrealist elements. That was a direct motivator in some of my early short film work. So he's definitely influential, but these days I feel more inspired and influenced by John Cassavetes and his like improv-y kind of approach. So if I'm approaching it as a filmmaker, not just a film watcher, I gotta go Cassavetes. A lot of people might disagree on that one, but I'm going Cassavetes. Okay, Spike Lee versus Andrei Tarkovsky. Andrei Tarkovsky is one of those guys who's in like another league beyond most filmmakers. Spike Lee obviously made a lot of really important movies, but I think Andrei Tarkovsky pretty handily takes this pairing. Spike Lee probably could have gone further if he was up against less of a titan in the first round. Okay, next up is Michael Mann versus Jean-Pierre Melville. This is a very weird pairing, I would say. I guess they both make crime films and they both like action, though the way that they each approach action is vastly different. Michael Mann's peaks, his highs are extremely high, like Heat for one. I think Jean-Pierre Melville is more consistent because Michael Mann has a couple duds in his career, whereas Melville, if he has any duds, I haven't found them. And I've seen quite a few of his movies at this point. More since I did that Le Samurai video. I've seen Army of Shadows and Le Cercle Rouge now too. Michael Mann is more inconsistent. He has some great movies, but he also has like Black Hat isn't great, Miami Vice isn't great. I think for consistency's sake, Jean-Pierre Melville is going to take this matchup. Okay, Steve McQueen versus John Carpenter. This is Steve McQueen is obviously more recent. His career is fresher, still earlier on. John Carpenter is like retired at this point. All of Steve McQueen's movies have been excellent, but John Carpenter has made some like all-time classics. I think the smaller filmography and the like recency thing is going to have me go towards John Carpenter. But I think maybe like a couple decades down the line, Steve McQueen might be able to pull ahead. By the way, I've made tier lists for many of these filmmakers. Check the description for a playlist of all my tier lists where I talk about these filmmakers' full bodies of work. Okay, next up is George A. Romero versus Abbas Kiarostami. This is such a weird pairing. I mean, it's got to be Abbas Kiarostami. George A. Romero is excellent at what he's going for, but he's not going for this like high art house kind of cinema, which Abbas Kiarostami is excelling at. And okay, Steven Soderbergh versus Stanley Kubrick. I like Steven Soderbergh a whole lot, especially like his kind of philosophy on filmmaking, the way that he will do like a big studio movie and then go do some movies that he knows are not going to be commercially successful whatsoever. His like one for me, one for them approach. So I appreciate that a whole lot. But Stanley Kubrick's taking this one. I think that's pretty cut and dry. Okay, oh wow, this is a big one. Akira Kurosawa versus Alfred Hitchcock. These are two titans. One Japanese titan, one. Well, Hitchcock's British, but his movies are mostly American. This is genuinely really tough. Oh man, this is a tough one. I agonized a lot over Park Chan-wook versus Bong Joon-ho, and this is the next really tough one. These are two filmmakers who could make really deep runs in this tournament if they weren't going head-to-head in the first bracket here. They're both so important, too. I can't even be like, well, the importance factor or whatever. They're from, like, similar kind of eras, too. They're both much older than many of the filmmakers on this list. They're both, like, top of their generation, both influential and innovators. This is a nasty one. Oh man, this should have been like in the finals or whatever as a matchup. I think I'm leaning towards Akira Kurosawa, but I would not be upset by anyone going with Hitchcock, because Hitchcock's a legend, of course. Oh my, holy fuck. How does this randomly happen? Paul Schrader versus Martin Scorsese. Okay, so I think a lot of people think of Paul Schrader as the screenwriter who worked with Martin Scorsese a lot. I think Paul Schrader is an excellent director in his own right. I wanted to include him on here. But if he's going up against Scorsese, that's just not even fair. Because like he wrote some of Scorsese's best movies. It's got to be Scorsese. Scorsese's another, I think, contender to take the whole thing. Like Scorsese and Lynch and some of these other guys. Paul Schrader, I love you, but you can't go up directly against Scorsese. Okay, that is the first round of the left side of the bracket, but we got a whole right side of the bracket to go through as well. Okay, Christopher Nolan versus John Woo. Now, I have a lot of respect and admiration for Christopher Nolan. I do think he's a great filmmaker. His movies often don't connect as much with me as they do with many other people. As I've said before on this channel, I don't really vibe as strongly as a lot of people with like big blockbusters and big spectacle movies. And that's definitely what Christopher Nolan makes. Like I don't hold Inception in as high regard as a lot of people do. Same with like, his Dark Knight movies, and I really did not like Tenet at all. John Woo is taking this. I do think Nolan has made some great movies, like Memento I love. Memento's excellent. The Prestige is great. Dunkirk's really good, but John Woo's gonna take this one. Okay, Francis Ford Coppola versus Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Kiyoshi Kurosawa I love. He's a little less talked about, especially if you are directly comparing him to the other Kurosawa, Akira Kurosawa. There's no relation, they just have the same last name. But Kiyoshi Kurosawa is great as well. When you're going up against Francis Ford Coppola, you're going to lose most of the time. Okay, Edgar Wright versus Fritz Lang. This is such a... We're talking about like a hyper-modern director versus like a silent film era director. Fritz Lang was so influential and so important to cinema. He's one of those directors that really pushed the form, advanced the form with the likes of Metropolis, and then again with M, and many other great movies. I think Fritz Lang's going to take at least this first round based on the importance and influence factor. Okay, Michelle Haneke versus Robert Rodriguez. This one's pretty easy. This is Michelle Haneke. I'm not going to waste too much time on that one. Okay, Sergio Leone versus Milos Forman. This is a really interesting one. Sergio Leone, of course, best known for the Dollars trilogy, as well as his Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America, all great films. Milos Forman is the man behind movies like Amadeus and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They're both really good. Milos Forman doesn't have as many like iconic movies. I guess he kind of does, because there's also like Man on the Moon is really good as well. I feel like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus might both be better than Sergio Leone's best movies. Good About the Ugly is great. So are both of his Once Upon a Time movies are great. This is a tougher one than I would have thought when I'm actually thinking about it. I think I'm going to go with Milos Forman, which is maybe a outside the box pick. Alfonso Cuarón versus William Friedkin. Again, two extremely different filmmakers. And again, William Friedkin is like a generation earlier. This is actually a pretty easy one for me. I'm going to go William Friedkin. I love William Friedkin. Along with Sidney Lumet, I consider him a little bit underrated, even though he has some like huge movies. Like The Exorcist gets all the love that it deserves. The French Connection gets the love that it deserves. But I feel like Billy Friedkin behind the camera doesn't always get the love that he deserves as a filmmaker, and I'm going with him. Okay, wow. Ingmar Bergman versus Asghar Farhadi. This is a tough one. Again, different generations, but these are both, I would say, like titans of the foreign language and like art house worlds. I think I don't know if they make similar movies, but they make movies of a similar caliber and a similar like appeal in the like art house crowd. I think it would be an easy decision for most people to go with Ingmar Bergman. I do really love Asghar Farhadi's movies, though. I need to do an Asghar Farhadi tier list, speaking of which. Ingmar Bergman has more movies that I haven't seen yet, I will say, to give him the benefit of the doubt. I've seen some of his big movies, like, I've seen The Seventh Seal and Persona and like Winter Light. I've seen a bunch of his movies, but I haven't seen all of his movies. Whereas Asghar Farhadi, I've seen pretty much all of his movies. I just have to watch that one he did with Javier Bardem. I haven't seen that one yet, but I've seen his other movies. This is actually a pretty tough one. I think I'm going to go Bergman still. Okay, Terry Gilliam versus the Coen brothers. The Coen brothers are a definite, I would say, a dark horse contender to maybe take the whole thing. Coen brothers beat Terry Gilliam for me pretty easily. Okay, Takeshi Kitano versus David Cronenberg. This is a fun pairing. Takeshi Kitano is the guy who made movies like Sonatine, Hanabi. He did one of the Blind Swordsman Zatoichi movies. You might know him as an actor in movies like Battle Royale. He's the teacher in that. Fascinating person. I plan on talking about Takeshi Kitano in dedicated videos eventually. I think I'm going David Cronenberg, though. But the man behind movies like, Crash, The Good Crash, Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly. Okay, Frank Capra versus Richard Linklater. Frank Capra, I guess you could argue, is the more like important and influential filmmaker because he came far earlier. He was definitely important in the he was one of the best of like the old Hollywood system. Frank Capra made movies like It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, like timeless classics like that. I'm definitely feeling the lean towards Richard Linklater. If I'm definitely going on my favorite, it's definitely Richard Linklater. And he was definitely an important voice too. He's a really important voice in the like new wave of indie filmmaking. I love that he's been able to find such success by making movies that buck all of the trends and feel so outside of the norm. I'm going Linklater. Okay, Billy Wilder versus Alejandro González Iñárritu. Iñárritu is great, but I gotta go Billy Wilder. Billy Wilder has the more iconic movies, also a much larger filmography, which does factor into it a little bit, even though it's maybe not as fair to the more recent filmmakers. But I think you can't overlook it entirely. Orson Welles versus Denis Villeneuve. I love Denis, but Orson Welles is the obvious pick here. Ridley Scott versus Pedro Almodovar. I think a lot of people would go Ridley Scott. For me, this is an easy decision. If you've seen my Ridley Scott tier list, which I recommend checking out if you haven't seen it, but if you've seen that, you know that I have some issues with a lot of Ridley Scott's movies, even though I do think he's a great filmmaker and has made many good movies. Almodovar takes the slot here. Brian De Palma versus Yorgos Lanthimos. This is an interesting one. Lanthimos is obviously the more recent one, fewer movies, which could count against him, but it also means that he hasn't had any like huge failures yet. The only one of his movies that I didn't really like was Alps, and even Alps was still fine. Brian De Palma has some real stinkers in his filmography, alongside all the like really great timeless movies like Blowout and like Scarface and whatnot. And but I think I'm actually going to go Lanthimos on the basis that De Palma has some real bad movies mixed in there, but mostly towards the latter half of his career. So Lanthimos is going to take it on by virtue of that. Okay, David Fincher versus Takashi Miike. Takashi Miike is one of the most prolific filmmakers out there. The guy pumps out movies like nobody's business. He's made well over 100 movies at this point, and that's 100 movies in the span of like 30 years or something like that. Like he pumps out several movies a year most of the time. So there are a lot of movies that are not good, but his scattershot approach produces a lot of real gems. Takashi Miike is the guy behind movies like Ichi the Killer, Gozu, which I reviewed, 13 Assassins, which I have a poster for right here. Excellent film. Audition, made lots of great movies. David Fincher's going to take this one, though. And I'll get more into, like, why David Fincher in his next pairing, probably. Okay, Krzysztof Kieslowski versus Quentin Tarantino. These are kind of like almost opposite ends of the spectrum as far as like mainstream versus art house goes. If you say Krzysztof Kieslowski, most general audiences are gonna go, who? What are you saying? Whereas everyone knows the name Quentin Tarantino. Kieslowski has really made some of the best movies ever made. You could say that about Tarantino too, though. His movies are far more accessible and approachable. I guess you could say viscerally entertaining, whereas Kieslowski's kind of require a bit more patience. Kieslowski's, if anyone doesn't know, he's the guy behind like the Three Colors trilogy, The Double Life of Veronique, the short film series. His movies that are called A Short Film About, but they aren't actually short films. The Decalogue, lots of great stuff. I do tend to lean towards the art house side of things, the more like prestige and like highbrow things. I think this might be the one time where I'm going to go the more mainstream entertainment route. I think I am going to give Tarantino the win here because he's so ubiquitous. He's also really important for like indie filmmaking, the way that he broke through with Reservoir Dogs in particular. He didn't stay indie, of course. I'm feeling Tarantino right now. I feel like further down the line, I might change my mind on this, but I'm going to go Tarantino. Okay, we're on to the next round, which I guess what would you call this? This would be the finals, so this would be the semifinals and then quarterfinals. Is that how that works? And this is pre-quarterfinals? I'm not a sports person, so I don't know if that's how that works. Oh, fucking shit. Okay, I should have known that this was coming up based on the other two who worked out, but this is a really tough pairing. David Lynch has taken out strong competitors. I gotta go David Lynch. I'm a total David Lynch fanatic. As much as I love Park Chan-wook, it's gotta be David Lynch. Okay, Mike Leigh versus Guillermo del Toro. I think I'm going to blow some fucking minds here, but I'm going Mike Leigh. Some people probably don't even know who Mike Leigh is because he's far less talked about. Mike Leigh made movies like Secrets and Lies, Vera Drake, which I talked about in my How to Give Actors Freedom video essay. He made like Mr. Turner, Naked, lots of really great movies. Okay, Wes Anderson versus Sidney Lumet. This is a pretty tough pairing, but actually not really. It's actually a pretty easy decision for me to go Sidney Lumet. Again, I think a lot of people are going to go Wes Anderson here. Sidney Lumet I never see included on like the best filmmakers ever list, and that's what I'm doing here. He's on my best filmmakers ever list, and I think he's going to make a deep run, Sidney Lumet. Okay, Paul Thomas Anderson versus Werner Herzog. PTA is the clear like cinephile favorite. Like if you look at like film discourse and whatnot, like there's so many video essays and whatnot about Paul Thomas Anderson. Not as many about Werner Herzog, not as much love for him online. I do think Werner Herzog's the better filmmaker. And that's even including, he does have a couple misses in his filmography, but like he has so many like all-time greats. Fitzcarraldo, Aguirre, The Wrath of God, Strozik, so many just phenomenal like all-time great like works of art. That's not to mention even like Cobra Verde and his Nosferatu the Vampire, all kinds of it's Herzog. Herzog's another one who a deep run is warranted for him. Okay, John Cassavetes versus Andrei Tarkovsky. Personally, like as a filmmaker, I feel far more inspired and influenced by John Cassavetes, but I think I need to cancel out a little bit of my bias here and go with Tarkovsky is definitely a higher caliber director. So I could cancel a little bit of my bias and go with Tarkovsky. Jean-Pierre Melville versus John Carpenter. John Carpenter has some misses. Like Vampires is bad. Ghosts of Mars is, I can't even get through that one. The Ward is bad too. He's got some misses. Jean-Pierre Melville's far more art house and less mainstream. I think I'm gonna go Melville. Yeah. I'm going to go Melville. I love Carpenter, though. Abbas Kiarostami versus Stanley Kubrick. This is an interesting. This is two titans going up here. I think I'm going to shock some people here by going with Abbas Kiarostami. Okay, oh fuck, this is a fucking tough one. Scorsese had kind of an easy one in the first round with Paul Schrader, but going up against Akira Kurosawa, man, holy shit. Akira Kurosawa and Martin Scorsese both have the power to take the whole tournament. Akira Kurosawa had a tough fight for him in the first round, and he's got another tough fight for him in round 2. A lot of people go Kurosawa. I think a lot of people go Scorsese too. And I think I gotta go Scorsese. I think you just can't beat Scorsese. So I don't think you can beat Scorsese. Oh man, that's a tough one. I might get some pushback on that one. Because Akira Kurosawa, really, he had a hard fucking bracket ahead of him with these two people, man. Kurosawa could have easily gone to the finals if he had weaker competitors. But okay, now we're on to the other half of the bracket. John Woo versus Francis Ford Coppola. I love John Woo. He's got some misses, but so does Francis Ford Coppola. He's got quite a few misses in the more like modern part of his filmography. But I think Coppola's going to take the win on this one with, you know, the Godfather movies, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now. Fritz Lang versus Michelle Haneke. This is a tough one. One is far more influential. The other is more modern, but really like immaculate films. I think I'm leaning towards Haneke. So let's go with that. Okay, Milos Forman versus William Friedkin. Forman fought hard to get past Leone in the first round. William Friedkin, let's see. I think I'm going to go Friedkin. I really do feel like Friedkin deserves more love as a director. I'm going to go Friedkin. Ingmar Bergman versus the Coen brothers. Okay. A lot of people would have Bergman going all the way to the finals. I got to go Coen brothers, man. The Coen brothers are special. They're a special duo. Cronenberg versus Linklater. This is another tough one. This was really tough, actually. In this specific moment, I am feeling Linklater. At other moments, I might be feeling Cronenberg. At this moment, I'm feeling Linklater, so I think I gotta go with this. But oftentimes when I'm doing a tier list or whatever, I'm feeling one way when I'm recording it, and then I'm already feeling a little different by the time I'm editing the video, and then by the time I release it, I might be feeling different again. This is one where I feel like I could be swayed to either side. This is what I'd be curious to hear people's thoughts in the comments, because I could really be swayed to either side. Right now I'm feeling Linklater though, so I'm gonna go Linklater. Okay, Billy Wilder versus Orson Welles. Obviously Citizen Kane is extremely influential, but it's far from being Welles' only good movie. Like The Trial is excellent. Magnificent Amberson is pretty good though, a bit flawed. Touch of Evil is excellent. Billy Wilder with movies like The Apartment and Sunset Boulevard and Double Indemnity. I think I'm going Billy Wilder. That might be a bit of an upset as well, but I'm going Billy Wilder. Okay, Pedro Moldovar versus Yorgos Lanthimos. This time, the recency bias is going to hurt Yorgos because Moldovar has the longer career and more great films in there. Okay, David Fincher versus Quentin Tarantino. Again, a few years ago, this would have been easy for me, and I would have gone Tarantino all the way. Now it's more of a tough comparison. I actually just watched a little clip of Tarantino bad-mouthing David Fincher. I mean, only like half bad-mouthing him. He was saying he's a great filmmaker, but I'm better than him because I'm a writer-director and he's just a director, which is kind of, I don't know. It's like, yeah, you got a point, like, but also it's a pretty arrogant thing to say, you know, I don't know. I mean, no one's ever accused Tarantino of being modest. Fincher does have a couple misses, I suppose, like Alien 3, which he's disowned, so I don't really want to count that against him. I kind of feel like that was out of his control. But I wasn't a big fan of Mank. Mank it still had a lot of merits to it. Panic Room isn't as immaculate as his other movies are. Whereas Tarantino, I don't really think Tarantino has any misses, if you want to look at it that way. I think Tarantino, all of his movies are great. I'm not sure. This one's really tough. I think I'm actually going to go Tarantino by like 5% Tarantino's way. Not a blow up by any means, but I think I am going to go Tarantino. Okay, now I think this is the quarterfinals. So we're getting into tough pairings here. David Lynch versus Mike Leigh. Okay, Mike Leigh had a good run, but it's David Lynch. That's actually a pretty easy matchup for it being the quarterfinals here. This is an easier decision than the previous two Lynch pairings. Sidney Lumet versus Werner Herzog. This is the fucking hard one. These two, both I think are rightly hailed by the cinephile crowd, but deserve even more attention than they get, I think. Okay, I don't want to rush through this one. I want to give this one the attention that it deserves. Werner Herzog's a little more inconsistent, a little more all over the place. And they both have like all-timer movies. Like maybe, okay, I think I've waited to list some of Sidney Lumet's movies. Sidney Lumet is the guy behind Dog Day Afternoon, which I've talked about extensively on this channel, both in my John Cazale video and in my How to Give Actors Freedom video. I think he's come up in other videos too. 12 Angry Men, the original. Network. Those are 3 all-timers right there. Plus tons of other great movies. Man, this is a really tough one. I think I'm going to go Lumet, actually, for the consistency's sake. But Werner Herzog's another one that could have made it all the way to the finals if the bracket had been randomly organized in a different order. Andrei Tarkovsky versus Melville. Kind of like the David Lynch matchup, this is a pretty easy one for the quarterfinals here. Tarkovsky is the clear winner here. Okay, Abbas Kiarostami versus Scorsese. Both excellent, but I gotta go Scorsese. For me, this one isn't too difficult. It's actually kind of an easy one for me. Scorsese is moving forward here. Okay, the quarterfinals weren't actually that difficult except for the Lumet versus Herzog was the tough quarterfinal one. But now quarterfinals on the other half of the bracket. Francis Ford Coppola versus Haneke. I gotta go Coppola. His highs outweigh his lows. Friedkin versus the Coen brothers. I love Friedkin. I sung his praises a lot here, but it's the Coen brothers moving forward. Linklater versus Billy Wilder. Okay, let's see here. I really love Linklater. I feel like Linklater gets a lot of love, but I still feel like I love Linklater more than most people do. His movies really connect for me. I feel like when I first started screenwriting, I was always trying to write Richard Linklater movies. And that was before I'd even seen any of his movies. First, I was drawn to his type of movies where they're like about nothing, the kind of conversational style where like very little plot. Not anymore. My screenwriting has definitely moved away from that style. But that was like my gut instinct when I first started writing like fiction, was that type of like very, very conversational, very light on plot, like the Before trilogy and like Slacker and whatnot. I actually wrote a movie that was exactly Slacker. I'm not saying like quality-wise, my movie was awful because I wrote it in fucking high school. It was terrible. But it had the exact structure and style and themes of Slacker. I accidentally wrote a vastly inferior Slacker in high school. So Linklater is very close to me. Once I finally saw Slacker, I was like, oh, so it could be done right, and I just, was doing it terribly. Anyway, Linklater's going to take the win here. Pedro Moldovar versus Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino is definitely the more popular one. And you know what? I wasn't expecting a Moldovar necessarily to go this far, but I think I'm going to give it to a Moldovar. Now, I might change my mind on that upon like revisiting or whatever. Maybe this might be another one that by the time I'm editing, I might feel differently. Kind of like the David Fincher versus Tarantino one. Right now, in this exact moment, I'm feeling a Moldovar. I'm feeling Pedro Moldovar. I think I've waited to listen to his movies so far, but he does movies like The Skin I Live In, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, All About My Mother, Bad Education. Recently, I haven't seen it yet, but he did Pain and Glory, which I'm very excited to see. He did Volver, Broken Embraces, lots of great movies that are definitely a little outside the mainstream, but excellent work. Okay, that was the quarterfinals finished off. Now we're up to the semifinals, right? Oh, fuck, David Lynch versus Sidney Lumet, okay. Why are all of these matchups with these couple of guys are so tough. I know it's going to get harder as it goes along, but this one, holy shit. Oh, man. Sidney Lumet deserves so much more love. I think I've sung his praises enough here, though. I can't. No one tops Lynch. Yeah, it's got to be Lynch moving forward here. Okay, Tarkovsky versus Scorsese. Oh, these finals. I'm liking how this tournament broke down because these finals are really tough. I gotta go Scorsese. I think the like real prestige art house crowd might disagree, but I gotta go Scorsese. You can't beat Scorsese, which I just said about Lynch. So. Oh my God, I know Lynch versus Scorsese is coming up next, and I have no fucking clue what I'm going to pick for that. Okay, Francis Ford Coppola versus the Coen brothers. Now, I've waited to talk about Francis Ford Coppola's big misses I think they are going to factor in here. Like I said, I've sung his highs very, very strongly, but he does have like Jack and Twixt and like Tetro and like a bunch of newer garbage that it's like he forgot how to make a movie. Even Godfather 3 I don't like. It's gonna be the Coen. Now the Coen have a couple of misses as well. They have the Lady Killers and they have Intolerable Cruelty. Those are the only two that I don't like. And even still, I don't think they're terrible. I would still give them like a middle of the road kind of score. They're terrible by Coen Brothers standards, but like by normal movie standards, they're fine. They're like 5 out of 10 movies probably. Yeah, Coen Brothers are going to edge out Coppola here. Linklater versus Almodovar. I'm kind of already feeling like I should have gone Tarantino over Almodovar. Now that I'm seeing this pairing, because I feel like Tarantino versus Linklater would be a tougher decision. See, that's interesting. When it's Almodovar versus Tarantino, I feel like Almodovar comes out on top. And when it's Richard Linklater versus Almodovar, I feel like Richard Linklater comes out on top. But if it was Richard Linklater versus Quentin Tarantino, I feel like it would be a harder decision. Does that make sense? Does that mean I made the wrong pick with Almodovar versus Tarantino? Is that what that means? I'm not sure, but I think Linklater is coming out on top. Okay, that was the semifinals, right? Now we are in the finals, or is this the semifinals? I don't fucking know. This one, man. Okay, I'm gonna do the other side first because I can't handle Lynch versus Scorsese. Coen Brothers versus Linklater. I gotta go Coen Brothers. They are making it. Okay. Now I gotta really buckle down and think. Lynch versus Scorsese. This is so difficult for me. How the fuck do I decide this? It should probably be these two in the finals. It should probably be, because whoever wins this, I'll say right now, whoever wins Lynch versus Scorsese is going to beat the Coen Brothers. I'm going to say that right now. So it's really, this is kind of the real finals. If they were on opposite ends of the bracket, it would definitely be these two going head to head in the finals. This is excruciating for me to pick. Oh my fucking God. I think I gotta go Lynch. Oh, that is so hard. It's so hard for me to... It's so hard to not give it to Scorsese, but I don't think I physically could not give it to Lynch, if you know what I mean. So it's got to be Lynch. And then, like I said, Lynch beats the Coen Brothers. So Lynch takes it. Lynch is hereby named the official Brickwall Picture 2022 Best Director of All Time. Best filmmaker to ever live. Did you have fun with this video? I had a lot of fun making it, actually. This is way more entertaining for me personally than doing like a simple top 10. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd like to do more like this in the future, more of these like bracketed tournaments. I feel like this is a fun way to talk about movies. What other like movie categories would you like to see a tournament like this for? Let me know in the comments. I'm about to shoot one for the best westerns ever made, and I think I'm probably going to do one for the best noirs ever made. Like, if we're looking at genres. I'm not going to do one for just action movies because I'm working on an official top 100 action movies list. So that will be separate and would be redundant to do the tournament too. Thanks for watching. Let me know who your pick would be out of this pool or just in general. And of course, let me know who you would want to see included in the second edition. I already have a whole bunch of filmmakers for the second edition, but I don't have 64 more, so I could use some more filmmakers to include and maybe even some new ones to check out. And so long.